Welcome into the Paul Farrington Show. Paul, joined by Robert Ziggy Ziegler in Delaware right now. He's on a Delaware trip. And producer Zach Bloomquist, the best executive producer in the game. So we just finished up a live, okay? Talking about the Packers options after DK Metcalf goes to Pittsburgh. Devontae Adams goes to the Rams. And we're just sitting here, after our show, we usually sit around for a few minutes and just talk. And Ziggy's saying, man, I just don't think the Packers are going to be able to make any sort of splash. And we're walking through guys saying like Khalil Mack, maybe he's going to go there. Chris Godwin's probably going to stay in Tampa. And if he goes, we're not sure it would be to the Packers. And we're walking through everything here. And Ziggy starts bringing up the Metcalf trade again with the Steelers. And he says, it's just a weird fit between Pickens and Metcalf. Like you have two guys, two downfield threats. But you need someone who has a good deep ball, good offensive line. Like the Steelers just don't have this. I'm saying, they're not really complimentary. Zach didn't really like we're all talking about this trade. And Ziggy says, man, it makes you think that they got to be ready to move on from Pickens. And I just leaned back in my chair and went, wait a second. We were just talking about all these players that the Packers missed out on and that they didn't have another guy left who could potentially make a splash. I went, wait a second here. There's no way you think, and Zach goes, Pickens to the Packers? And Ziggy's like, oh my God, like that actually kind of makes sense. We're talking about how the Packers won't pull the trigger on any trade, but the Steelers have a weird fit now. Does this mean that George Pickens is the number one target potentially for the Packers at receiver? Is this...
Well, I mean, look, I'll say this much. Here's another reason they're a bad fit. You didn't mention they both wear number 14.
Yeah, right. That's a problem.
No. So it's, look, I cannot imagine the Pittsburgh Steelers plan to keep DK Metcalf and George Pickens. George Pickens, we saw last year, he was on the will he won't he trade block, right? They were unhappy with him in various ways. There were character issues, there were attitude issues, there were effort issues. But George Pickens, frankly, in terms of how he played, is basically better than DK Metcalf at being a deep threat. If you look at yards per route run on deep threat, he was number one in the NFL. He beat out DK. He beat out Terry McLaurin, Christian Watson, A.J. Brown, Nico Collins. If you look at how many times he was able to catch the deep ball, no receiver in the entire NFL caught more deep balls per game than George Pickens. Again, more than DK Metcalf, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Terry McLaurin, Christian Watson. Like he was at the top in both of those categories. So you have a guy who is maybe the most effective deep ball wide receiver in the NFL. You're not going to pair him up with the number 2 most effective deep ball wide receiver in the NFL and DK Metcalf because they'll just vulture each other. You don't have a quarterback who can throw it. You don't have an offensive line who can protect the quarterback. Defenses will just play deep, knowing they can have guys cover both of them. Like it makes no sense. But this trade does make sense, and this big deal does make more sense if you're ready to move on from George Pickens and make him someone else's problem.
Well, that's the key word.
Be on the markets.
That is the key word that you just said there, Ziggy, though. Problem. And that's where I wonder if Green Bay is interested, because we all know that George Pickens is a really talented receiver. Jack will come on and tell you that George Pickens is one of the most talented receivers in the league, and he might not be wrong. But he is a massive headache. Like every single week, it seems like George Pickens is doing something stupid. He's doing something that the Steelers have to come out and address, or that the fan base is saying, "What? Why? Like, why is that the answer?" And the Packers just don't seem like that kind of team to me that want to deal with those kind of nutcases. So I don't want to call them a nutcase. That's felt mean. They deal with those kind of personalities. So I wonder. The Packers are on the contrary. The Packers are a great organization, great dudes there, very well run, like the kind of place where you could get George Pickens under control. Green Bay is also a pretty tame city. So George Pickens might not have as much of a spotlight on him there. But if you talk talent alone, we do agree that George Pickens would be a move the needle type of a player, right?
There's no doubt about it. I meant it when I said last year he played, despite all of the trouble, and there was plenty of trouble. He played like the best deep ball receiver in the entire NFL. Period. Unless that is the kind of guy, he would move the deal more than DK Metcalf, assuming you can get him in order.
Spectacular catches all the time. I mean, he is a great receiver. It's just a matter of, can you handle the personality? DK's 27 years old, and he took on that 5-year deal, $150 million. A lot of Packers fans who looked at that said, I don't want to pay DK that much money when he's going to be 30 pretty soon, or 31 by the end of the deal, 32. Pickens is 24.
He turned 24 6 days ago.
Just turned 24. This is a young receiver. It's a young star receiver who just has that kind of diva edge to him that a lot of receivers sometimes take on. So if you're willing to roll the dice there, you're going to probably have to hand him a sizable contract that competes with all these other big receiver deals that are coming in. But if the Packers make a move, like George Pickens is someone who should be very good for a very long time. And you could get ahead of that market and sign and try and get a deal done before Jamar Chase inks his deal. I see this as we talked about players that would scare us if they went to the Packers. George Pickens would scare me if he was on the Packers. I would not want to deal with that twice a year. And that's one of the reasons that if I were a Green Bay fan, I'd be like, let's go make this move. Let's go boost this up. He's a number one alpha. Everyone else slides into their positions.
And I think with George Pickens, too, for the price he's going to command, it's not obvious to me that you need to offer him a giant contract when you trade for him. I think if you're the Packers, you can sell George Pickens playing a year for you like this. Look, we're not going to give you the big contract, but what are you going to do in Pittsburgh? There's no quarterback there. No team, I think, right now, without seeing that George Pickens can play a good, clean year of football, wants to offer him an enormous contract. He's too risky for that, I think. If you're Green Bay, say, look, man, we've got Jordan Love. We will be competing for a Super Bowl with you next year. If you come here and you contribute, you can do what Antonio Brown did. Cash huge in free agency, and then you can do whatever you want over there. Just give us 1 year. Give us 3 or 4 months of your life just in line. You'll be in for a huge payday. You can finally play winning football, something you could never do in Pittsburgh. You have a quarterback who, let's be clear, can deliver a deep ball with the best of them. You've got a functional offensive line. He'll be in an offense that knows how to take advantage of him. I think there's a real pitch you can make to George Pickens. And if it turns out he's great and fits, you can offer him a big deal. You can tag and trade him. There's all sorts of options for the Packers. I think for the price he's going for, given that I think everybody in the NFL smells blood in the water and know that Pickens needs to get moved, I can't see Pickens playing another game as a Steeler. And I think the Packers are the sort of team that can justify taking the risk. Now, we haven't seen a lot of risk taking from the Packers before. That's the thing that gives me pause about whether or not this will actually happen. But if you were looking for a guy to take a calculated risk on, if you say he's got so much talent and we have to try, George Pickens, I think, is better than DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf won't play a snap for you without a mega extension. George Pickens, I think there's a real chance there.
If you had the choice between going after Pickens or being aggressive and going after Trey Hendrickson, if you were a Packer fan, which player would you prefer to go after?
If you can get George Pickens without the mega extension, I am worried about the kind of extension Trey Hendrickson is going to command. We saw the market for edge rushers this offseason explode. This Myles Garrett deal, it is not going to go the way of the Deshaun Watson deal. This is not going to be a deal where people look at it and say, aren't going to consider that. That's not real. Max Crosby signed for 35 and a half. We got over $40 million from Myles Garrett.
Yep.
Hendrickson is going to want to come in, I think, somewhere around or just between those numbers. He's going to say, yeah, I'm older. Maybe there's not as many years left in me, but I'm coming off a better season than any of those guys. I just had 17 sacks on a horrendous defense. And that's following up another year with 17 sacks on a horrendous defense. Like, this guy without pressure has been able to generate unbelievable numbers and production.
I didn't realize he was 30.
Yeah, I get it. It's like, he's old. I get it. But even if Trey Hendrickson is going to be 31 next season, you look at the deal Von Miller was able to get out of the Bills despite being much older and much more over the hill. I really believe that Trey Hendrickson is going to cash in big, and I'm not sure I want to risk handing him that, because if he bangs up his knee.
Yeah, I think between the two, yeah.
That's your team right there.
Trey Hendrickson is the better player between the two, like in terms of, at their position.
And he fills a more important need.
Position. Yep. But I do think that either one would be a move the needle guy. Can they get two? Can they afford to go? Like, I know that they don't have probably the capital or the willingness to do that.
They could get both of them. Absolutely. They won't get either of them, but they could get both of them.
If the Packers added Pickens and Hendrickson, that would be, and then just held on to some later round picks or something. Oh my gosh, dude. That would be.
I mean, I don't think Trey Hendrickson will be very expensive draft pick wise.
That would be if Green Bay did that. If they, let's just pretend they added Trey Hendrickson, George Pickens, that vaults them up. That probably puts them in that top tier contender group. I mean, that's nasty addition, and it's a draft class where, again, they say there are a lot of capable starters from this draft as you go on through it, like multiple rounds worth of good starters. Maybe not stars, but quality players. That sounds like, again, these are all hypotheticals. It's fun to do that, but you add two superstars, you add some pieces in the draft. It's still there. So maybe there are some still options for Green Bay to move the needle this offseason.
I mean, I'd rather do that than make Aaron Jones the sixth highest paid running back in the NFL.
Yeah, but we got to laugh at the Packers a little bit there and tell them we got their guy. So for now, we'll probably turn on our heads and be bad for us.
I mean, this is the thing is, do I think Pickens to the Packers is going to happen? I think there's a possibility of it. I don't think it's huge, but I think the Packers, I said this during our live, you can go back and see me go on a little bit of a rant about it if you want. The Packers are in a position, next year is their best year for some time, I think, to compete for a Super Bowl. When that window is open, every great general manager in the NFL goes in and says, we'll figure out what to do in 2026 and 2027 when they come. I want to field the best team I can this year, no regrets. I'm not going to lose because of inaction. And I think it's time for the Packers to start thinking that way, because if you want to compete in today's NFL, you look at the teams that win Super Bowls. Kansas City does this better than anybody. They're willing to add risky players. And I'm not talking about the criminal history stuff. I just mean players where it's not obvious they're going to be able to produce at a high level, but they have in the past, or there's questions around them. They add them and they say, we'll figure out the cap later. The Eagles do that. The Rams do that. The best organizations in the NFL do it. If the Green Bay Packers and Brian Gutekunst want to take that next step forward, it's time for them to do the same.
And there are some Packers fans who will listen to what you just said and say, hey, the Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes. Hey, the Rams have Matthew Stafford. Like, that's a difference there. A lot of Packers fans
sucks, you're done. You can't ever compete.
And a lot of Packers fans have been on record saying, our dude is much better than Jalen Hurts, who just won a Super Bowl. So if you're gonna look at how great Mahomes and Stafford are and say Love's not there yet, a lot of you think he's better than Jalen Hurts. So you should have your guy, right? He was hurt last year. People don't want to hear the excuses, but he was. Show some faith in him. Make a move to be a contender here. All right, we'll wrap it up there. But it's just interesting. We're sitting back thinking to ourselves, like, wait a second. There are a couple options still. And we'll see tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be, it could happen tonight. You just don't know. Well, I guess tomorrow, meaning this is going to come out on Monday morning. So later today. But it's going to be a crazy day. There's going to be a lot of news. Ziggy, thanks for hopping on. Producer Zach, appreciate you coming over last second here with all the trades. So we'll stay up to date on everything. And I'm sure we'll have some more instant reactions over the course of the next 48 hours.